conference yesterday was a bit rushed, so I am going to take all the time I need to talk about the Na Mozo, a society without orphans, how power is handled in matriarchies, because it's extremely relevant now. And I've been waiting for 5 years to find a way to talk about them, but it's not easy to gain platforms when we are talking about endangered, the last fragments of matriarchy in China. It's not easy to find platforms to talk about the last fragments of matriarchy in China, because we live in a world where there is such a rush to new, the old story of new. Let's wipe it off and make the new roads with the eternal stuff of the mutable ways of grandma nature that is embodied by the grandmothers, the living human grandmothers of the last fragments of the matriarchies in this world. And one of the last fragments is the Na, who might not be a matriarchy still, but they still conserve many vital features of the matriarchy, and we are going to go into that in a minute. Let's start from the beginning, because here nobody's going to rush us. Are known as Mozo Ren by the Chinese and the international, well, everyone calls them Mozo Ren, and they're also known as Mozo, as I wrote it there, which is the denomination that they asked from the government. What they actually call themselves is Na or Nari, or Naru as well, Naru and Nari. This was the PowerPoint that I made, and they are part of the Nashi, the Nashizuji, that is an ethnic group that was recognized as an ethnic minority in 1950, and well, all this stuff about numbers, and you can read it. They are 270,000, the Nashi, and the Na are part of the Nashi. They haven't obtained a title of their own other than at provincial level as Mozo Na people. That was in 1997. The Na of Yonning, where is the last Mozo, the last Na seer, the last Na shaman, so called. But she's not a shaman, she's a seer. Lived for quite a while during my field work. So this is where they are. I just wanted you to have a look. Lugu Lake is spread between Yunnan, that is this side where the mouth is moving, and that's Luoxi, that is the most famous touristic village. All over the lake, but especially in this area, there is like construction sites all over that are completely destroying bit by bit the heavenly beauty of this land, because it's just so beautiful. I don't know if I will show you some pictures later, but it's absolutely beautiful. Just under Tibet, so I go back, that's Lhasa, you see, so that's Bhutan, and it's here. This is Shangri-La, the mythical Shangri-La, and that's Sichuan, Chengdu, that still has some matriarchal habits that survive, but it's a modern town. A lot of ancient woven, I guess, in it. And that's Vietnam. So you have an idea where this is located. That's Southwest China. In my paper that I have to update, because it was written in 2017 at the beginning of this journey, and of the PhD in Xiamen, and I wrote Northwest China. That's a typo mistake. I'm dyslexic and I do write silly things like that. So let's go on. So the origins of this population are shrouded in mystery, yes, very much so. I invite you to read the paper and to read my dissertations when it's out, and to read Christine Mathieu. She talks about the religious syncretism. That is something fascinating and important to understand. But they descend from the Tibetans, most likely, and they have strong Mongolian influence. You can still very much feel the Mongolian and Tibetan influence in the people of Luguhu, because the Mongolians and Tibetans live there, because it really mixed and blended with the local culture. They have been on the territories for so. To go more into, because this stuff you can read it, and yes, we have time, but I also don't want to tire you with the things that you can find out yourself. What is more important here is I want to talk about power and matriarchy, and before I do that, let's talk a little bit about what is matriarchy, what is patriarchy. Well, patriarchy is largely, because you live in a patriarchy. Although, if you don't know what a matriarchy is, even though the matriarchy is not the opposite of patriarchy, as often thought when we hear the word, because we are made of binary thought, we are polarized, we are unreunited, so we kind of tend to think in this polarized and inefficient way that is binary thought. Matriarchy is not the opposite of patriarchy, and yet you do need to have a sense of what matriarchy truly is to be able to understand what patriarchy is and how to get out of it. Because if you are in the patriarchy and you are going to try and do is to get out of it, and this trauma response to, it's a trauma response from my point of view, because you can't, experience is that, or most of your experience is that, and what isn't that is a spontaneous experience or of love or spontaneity from. I did a lot of workshops on that with people, and really all over the world, and what comes up most often when people talk about, well, what is the patriarchy, and have you ever lived anything that isn't patriarchy? And when people say yes or no, when they say yes, they talk about moments of joy, of love, of spontaneity. So the idea of patriarchy is something that oppresses mainly, and that imposes. So that's why I have, when I was given this silly paper that was called, in 2017, I was given this paper, this term paper, that was, the title was rule, power, and order. And I was, oh my goodness, how do I talk about rule and power and order in because if you've been with the Nile, it's just concepts that wouldn't easily come to your mind. So I thought, okay, I'm going to look into the etymology, and bit by bit I reconnected to what could be the meaning of power here. In it, because on a non-rational level you know it, but then you have to find a way to talk about it. So the viability of the term matriarchal, this is very debated, this term, and there is the feminists on one side that give a use of the term that is ridiculed and mocked by the scholars, and in the academia is just, we are just starting to be able to use this term again, but it's not easy to, depends also in what country you are. And there is a huge conflict between popular views of matriarchy and academic views of patriarchy. So it's also important to bring these discourses together, because in the end we are still people, and the snotty academics snob popular views and feminist views, and the snotty new age shamanic practitioners, so-called, have their own, probably entirely valid, because every view is sacred, but their own entirely self-created views of matriarchy. And we also need to go and give voice to those who don't have voice, and they are disappearing. And the Na is a highly endangered ethnic group that has no voice, and if you want to give voice to the Na without the lies that and all these fake friends of the Aboriginal people, like the UN, the UNESCO, and all these ONGs that pretend to do one thing and that are associated to them, and pretend to do one thing and then they do the opposite. I am not going into this political stuff, but it's really, everything that concerns the natives is really business, really. It's business, it's glory, it's fame, it's business. It's nothing to do with actually rescuing these eternal wisdoms that are neither new or old, are the stuff that we are made of, because the people of beginning are still full of the innocence of the beginning, the innocence that is embedded in our human nature, even though we have forgotten it. And it's important to remember that. It's important to remember the timeless things of time, the timeless geometries, the cosmos, the ways of nature, the immutable ways of nature that we don't need to reinvent anew. We just need to discover in ourselves, because they are part of our identity. So if we come out of new and old and we find that place within that is the original, that is original, it's the origin of all. And in that origin of all, we find both new, because it's new, it's eternally new. Nature produces as a miracle, after millions of years, snowflakes that are new, and then they vanish quickly. That's the way she is. They vanish quickly, and then it starts over again, and they create this beautiful cloak of white. I'm just making a little example, and then I go on, and then he gets washed up, and then there is something else, and then he returns. But it's a cycle that it's perpetual, the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. We need, and that's what I choose to weave into this dark new way that I would like to call the eternal ways of harmony. So I wanted to quote Professor Abendroth, Heide Abendroth. She is, well, probably many of you know her because she's very well known, and she is a professor of philosophy, and she is the one that, from my point of view, even though I don't agree with everything that she says and does, I do really have respect for her definition of matriarchy, because it's the most philosophically correct, and it's the most correct in general, beyond any, like, if you didn't have any training, if you didn't know how to read and write, as a matriarch, I would say that this is the best definition of matriarchy, because it's correct. That's just what it is. As someone that lived in it, I can say. So the wave of popular I want to read it because she just says it right. The wave of popular and academic interest in non-patriarchal social models has inspired the creation of new terms. Why then insisting on the term? So these new terms are like matrifocal, matrilineal. Matrilineal is not new, but it's used a lot instead of matriarchal, because we don't have the guts to analyze and investigate deeply. Matrilineal, matrifocal, Gilanic, so there are all these matricentric. So why then insisting on the term matriarchy when so problematic? After all, we have 160 years of academic debate to try and erase this term. So she says recovering this term means claiming the economic, political, social and cultural knowledge of societies created by women. The long history of these cultures has been carried on by the women and men who have contributed in equal measure to keep them alive and to pass them on to future generations. Matriarchies are authentic, egalitarian societies. I am going to erase this gender, because gender is certainly not a concept that exists in the original matriarchies, even though it does exist in a way amongst the Na at the moment, which is part of why I would say they are no longer a matriarchy, but they still conserve very strong matriarchal features, and they are a matrifocal society. The social collaboration of the two sexes is based on this principle. In matriarchy, there is no such thing as two sexes. It's the matter of gender. It's something that I analyze in my two PhDs. I go back there. The one in history here for the University of Hamburg is the one that best analyzes the matter of gender and in female shamanism and of the polarities, because I talk about the widespread cult that from here, from the Celtic Isles to Central Asia, where I've been, to the and the areas of Mesopotamia and Greece and Italy and France and Spain and the Baltic coast and Eastern Europe. I mean, it's really widespread, and this is just the part. I didn't talk about North America and all that, because I'm not I'm not an expert of those parts, and it was a bit too wide, but everywhere there has been in the parts from here to Central Asia, here in the Celtic Isles, I mean, in this widespread cult centered around essentially the marriage of the sun and the moon, the yin and the yang, which you must not associate as it's often been done to the sun yang and the yin moon, because it's really it will lead you off the path, away from the truth of these ancient cults. But yes, in this PhD, I talk about that and how gender is actually not something that is, and the binary ways in which we think about gender, even in LGBT and progressive ways of looking at it, like it's really binary and in many ways from what non-gender is in matriarchy. So I'm not going to talk about that now because it's extremely complex and I don't want to go that deep. It must absolutely not be considered mirror images of patriarchal ones, because women have never needed such hierarchical structures. And, well, I would have, that's debatable, because women in patriarchy are responding to the traumas of patriarchy and they are reenacting. We are reenacting, I include myself, we are reenacting hierarchical structures, and we do that without we even realize it a lot of the time, and it's something that we need to keep in check. It's something that we need to keep in check in the circles, and in ourselves. Just like, you know, you eat, and after cooking and eating every day, you need to wash, and so you do with your body, and so you sleep and you wake up, and with the stuff of hierarchical structures, we are breeding them constantly. We are breeding the top to down dynamic all the time. It's in the food we eat, it's even in the veggies, it's not just in the meat and fish, and animal derived products. It's everywhere, because there is a vertical force. We force vegetables to grow in rows, and we force life to go in a way rather than in another, without allowing nature to take a course. We constantly try to harness our energy, our feelings, and to tell them wrong, essentially, to mortify them, which is something that doesn't happen in the matriarchy, because there isn't that top to down structure, and there isn't that judgment against nature, because nature is sacred. So whether it is a feeling in the human being that is part of nature, or is the nature doing the nature, like the river flowing where the river flows, and the ocean going where the ocean goes, and there is a way of innocence, again, this word, that we have forgotten, and that is very sacred to the matriarchies. So let's go on. Let's not get lost too much. So she talks about the fact that arche, because the word matriarchy is made of mater, that is mother, that is matter, and arche, that means dominion, but also beginning. And that's beginning is the oldest meaning of the word. The two concepts are distinct and should not be confused. even in Italian, they are clearly different. You would never translate archetype with dominator type, and you would not understand what archaeology means if it were translated as study of domination. But if you looked at it as study of beginning, then it does make sense. And this is the key of understanding what matriarchy means, because matriarchy means mother at the beginning. And if we can just understand that for a moment, I'm just going to stop reading there and going on this beautiful picture of stupa. That is the womb. It represents the womb, that construction. It has a womb shape. It will end like this. And it has the shape of a yurt, and it has a little oven inside there where the woman is here. There is an oven there, and she's putting offers in the oven. This is the top of the oven, and they burn incense and herbs in the oven, and then they use this Tibetan praying wheel, which I have upstairs. I should have taken it down to show you. The Tibetan wheel, prayer wheel, is full of prayers inside, and it's spun like on the hand, like in the hand, and spun clockwise, and they will walk at sunset and early in the morning, as well as at 9 in the morning. So they do it 3 times a day. They will walk around the stupa to call on the harmony from the good spirits of the nature, from the spirits of nature. They are calling on the harmony and the fortune for the whole society. And I just wanted to talk about that because the Na are hierarchies with this idea of mother at the beginning. Mother is not just the think in patriarchy mother is, because in patriarchy we have this idea of a producer of children for the patriarchy that serve the patriarchal systems and serve monogamic and mononuclear family structures that serve the pyramidal power of the patriarchy. And so we come to have in hate, again, something that has been already repressed and really thousands of years, that it's the mother principle. We are a mothered, traumatized children, all of us here, because we don't know the ways of softness of these people and the ways of harmonies, how they live. So all we have is try to invent new ways, because we can't look back at anything that we want to keep, maybe, anything that is loving and kind and doesn't need to be changed, because it's made in the ways of that regulate the nature. And the women, the mothers, the grandmothers in this case, the great mothers, grandmother means, are those that are able to keep these ways. And they are the life givers, not only of life as material life, but of life as dream, of life as reality as dream, like we are the matrix of all levels of real. So that's and the mother at the beginning means that everything that is wombless, that is born without womb, in matriarchy revolves around the womb and protecting the womb. So so-called men, wombless people, I would say, people that are born without womb, rather than trying to differentiate themselves from life giver, they adopt her ways. They of their ways, so that the difference in the body of the womb body and the wombless body is it disappears, it vanishes, because they are so in the listening of the womb that in a sense they are being themselves. They are womb being themselves, because they are in the listening and they protect it and they devote their lives to protect it. And this is not then later this idea that the male born are protecting the womb became, oh, women are weak and need men to protect them. No, women are extremely strong. They are regarded as the goddess. In fact, the lake that you see behind there is the lake mother. It's Gamu. And around the lake they have these mountain chains, and the mountain is also the goddess, is the goddess of the mountain, Gamu or Jemu, and is a lion goddess, and she's the beginning of all. So everything revolves around her and protecting her. That's why the life of woman is put ahead the group, and they will protect the body of the tribe as a whole. So if there is scarcity, they will protect those that are most likely to carry on life. Just to make an example. And the men are not in the mini-me ways of the West, where if they invite you to dinner, they think that they have right to access your body, and they revolve around themselves, and it's all about getting more and more. In the matriarchies, men serve womb, and it doesn't matter if it's their women or other women from another tribe, because for them a woman is life giver, and that's it. So they protect the life giver in every form, not only in human form, but in also in human form. In matriarchy we find this equivalence between woman and nature. In fact, they call on the spirits of nature to keep the harmony every day. They do it as a collective. All the Dabus meet, the grandmothers meet and walk around the stupas every morning praying, and every sunset at the liminal places. At dawn and sunset, there are the liminal places in which the sun and the moon meet. So it's the unpolarized place. That's why it's so magical in every culture, because it's where the polars meet. Two. We have, okay. So a matriarchy, I say the mozo is the na mozo. It's not na. Also the nashi, they are part of the nashi. The nashi call themselves na as well. So I will say na. The na mozo are no longer a matriarchy from my point of view, because not everything revolves around life giver, but still a lot of it, and so to a great extent is still a matriarchy in a way. Not entirely, but a lot of it. Percentage, but the woman leads. It's a house society, as we will see. So I will demonstrate how they lead politically in a way, because they are the ones that keep the order and the rule. And the way, really, they dictate the way, like the womb dictates the moon dictates the rhythms of life, of light, of the tides, of our menstruating bodies that have been demonized to the point that we can't enter the temples and the places of worship when we are menstruating, but actually in the matriarchies are the sacred times in which we are. It's the samahin of every month, the menstruation time, where even after you have menopause, if you have menopause, or if you, well, I am very connected to that time of life, the menopause life, and even though I didn't get there yet this time, you can still feel when your body would have the period. There is something really sacred in this eternal, in the listening of these eternal rhythms that the patriarchies have destroyed in these thousands of years running after the new, thinking that you are going to do it better this time than your parents, than your grandparents. But actually, if you don't look back at your root of who you are and where the love is really, because now we are going to look, and power is love. We will see. It's not a tacky affirmation, it's true. And we will see why now. So, in now, power is harso, and rule is the law, and order is shu. I wanted to look at the